Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about gachas in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this week we're going to discuss why PvP in gachas is the worst. It's awful. I hate it. And I know, Dave, that we're going to disagree on some of this, but yeah, my personal opinion is that gacha PvP is awful. I really don't enjoy it. I find it very frustrating in a lot of ways. Um, but just what is your, you know, as the resident negative Nancy, um, that's my stance. But do you agree, or are we going to be just repeating talking points
Well,
to each other?
as yes, you are the old man yelling at clouds. I think for this one, I think you have some ground to stand on with this one. Whereas last week I know we had our disagreements about 4 stars in gotcha games. As far as PvP gotchas go, gotcha games that are purely PvP, like that's the only gameplay loop in it. It's all PvP and it's only PvP. Those I agree are pretty awful. They're gonna be for whales. It's you're gonna pay to win, and that is the drive of it. If you play those as a free to play player, expect to progress very slowly, expect to lose a vast majority of your battles, and you just have to kind of live with that. So if that is your sense of fun, which I don't think most people consider losing to be fun, uh, yeah, again, completely agree with you on PvP or purely PvP gotchas suck. Now, if you're talking about PvP in gotchas as one component of the game, but that's not the only gameplay mode, probably have a little bit of pushback on you. But I want to hear your points because it makes sure that that is what you're arguing, that PvP as a whole sucks in gotchas. And if that is, yeah, I want to hear your points. So I'll probably give you a little pushback on that.
Okay. Well, then let's start with at least the points that we agree on, which is that, PvP only gachas are miserable. They are absolutely miserable to play, or play in. And I guess just to as a reference point, both Dave and I recently were playing a PvP gacha, which will remain nameless, uh, just on the off chance that for whatever reason somebody hears it. We don't want to be considered slanderous, but um, we were playing a PvP gacha, and admittedly, this is not the PvP's fault, but the monetization was extremely harsh, extremely pushed. It very much so was a pay to win game, and there were a number of foibles that came up while we were playing it that really annoyed me. A couple of things that kind of drove me nuts about it were beyond the pay to win aspect was the fact that they managed to design their system to be as aggressively frustrating as possible. So some examples were leveling up and getting new characters actually hurt you because they would make it so that you could see characters that weren't available to you while playing the game, but they were still taking up resources and slots for you to use. So you couldn't actually access these characters, but they're showing up as basically a free advertisement for them, um, potentially locking out a hit that you could have gotten for a character that you would have been able to play. Um, that was one issue. The other was there was an unfortunate loop where basically, in order to level up characters, you had to spend resources, and you always had more dupes basically of a character than you had resources to level them up. So you're constantly on a treadmill of trying to get the dupes applied so that you can level up the character so that you can use them in the PvP so that you can get wins and so on and so forth. And it was very much so a system that reinforces success because as long as you kept on winning, you got more free resources, etc., etc. And unfortunately, also reinforced losses. The more you lost, the less likely you were to win because you just weren't able to generate the income, you weren't able to generate the resources to keep up. You're constantly being kind of kicked down. So if you whale, I'm sure you had a great time. If you didn't whale, it it was miserable. Um, would that be an accurate summation of sort of your experience with that particular title?
Yeah, so yeah, to your points, I agree that the monetization aspect, that's not something unique to necessarily PvP exclusive gotchas. That monetization is, set by the developer. So to that, it's how great is developers' greed in this instance. Uh, Pretty great.
Hmm.
Any gotcha game where you see $100 or plus $100 plus package, um, I tend to immediately throw up a red flag on that. Like, okay, if you're selling something for over $100 or say $500 on a package, um, that just screams cash grab to me. But again, that's not a problem exclusive to PvP only gotchas. To the other item, to the other things you mentioned, yeah, the fact that it would take up a potential unit slot and show you a unit that you couldn't actually use, and therefore disadvantaging you to finding the units that you actually want or could use or would be useful. That's terrible gameplay mechanic choice, but like you said, it's incentivizing you to try and spend to pull for these characters. And then it's another thing then to pull the character, but then they have their individual levels that you have to manage with, resource. It seems it's a constant resource drain, and there's a constant shortage of resources. Um, and so that was a big problem to me. Now, another problem too was if you have kind of some of this jankiness that we're talking about in terms of their approach and some of the decisions when it comes to systems of the game, you then compound that with if the game is buggy or has issues, and then will just drive me up a wall. So if you have all those things as it is, that's already a problem. But then you compound that with bugs and issues like will be attacking a unit, and then for no reason whatsoever will just switch targets. Or let's say you have an assassin type unit, and typically assassins will, disappear or jump to the back line and attack range rather than attacking the tanks first. Well, if these assassins get jump happy for some reason, they jump 3 or 4 times before they actually start attacking things, all while they're being attacked while they're in the air. That just seems sloppy in the coding, programming of the character behaviors. So, but again, so some of those gripes that I had were more of bugs and programming in the games. But back to your points that you had made, yeah, if you fell behind early in a match against somebody, then you were gonna have a hard time catching back up. It was very rare that you would turn the tables as a free to play person, and then by losing, you still get a chance at some resources, but you're not getting nearly as many resources to grow your account as people that are winning, and so therefore you're actually having to play more matches than somebody who's winning to accrue the same amount of rewards. So again, just incentivizing folks to spend the money. But for whales too, even with whales, I think if you're whaling on a game like a PvP gotcha game, yes, I get it. A lot of folks will whale on this because they're wanting to flex and show off their fancy high level account. But at the end of the day, you're ultimately going to be placed against people that are your power level as well. So you're never going to actually be able to stomp anybody because you're just going to be playing against other people of your equivalent power level. And typically, the way games like this work is they'll try and matchmake you with folks that aren't necessarily your rank and aren't necessarily even your exact power level. Usually, I feel like it almost cheats you in that it's a majority of the time trying to put you in where you're not the top dog, where you're maybe in the lobby of a power ranking, maybe you're like the third or fourth seeded person out of 8 or whatever it is. So those were some aspects I have not only for the free to play players but for the whale players. Now, for those that are like the Giga whales and the Leviathans, right, even beyond whales, sure, maybe they're stomping people, but that's generational wealth that they just have to flush down the toilet, and they're choosing to do it on this game. Kudos to them.
Yeah. And basically, that end portion is where I wanted to start off with
Oh, did I
my.
steal some? Did I steal
No, no,
one
no,
of your
no, no.
points?
That's a perfect segue. Perfect segue. Um, which is that in a lot of PvP gotchas, now admittedly, it's a genre that I don't typically touch for a number of reasons. One of those reasons is the whale issue, which is that, if in these gotcha, typically in a PvP gotcha game, if you want to be good at it, it's not typically going to be a test of skill. it tends to default into, okay, who has paid the most money? Um, Again, that is not 100%. I recognize that, but I feel like 90 to 95% of the time, there is a pretty explicit deal on the table by a lot of these developers, which is, hey, if you swipe, you get power. Or at the bare minimum, if you swipe, you have a much easier access to power. You're able to level easier, you're able to get resources that make it so that you don't have to invest the time that others need to invest in order to scale the way that a lot of us would prefer to scale. And it might be a cultural thing. I know that in Southeast Asia, there's less of an issue with buying power in games, but at least, say here in America in general, the feeling on that is that, if you're paying to win, that's not a true representation of skill, and it can be very frustrating. And that's something that I very easily fall into. I get very annoyed when you clearly run across a whale account. It's okay, well, why did I even bother? The guy's gonna win. Why are they wasting my time throwing me into this match? They might as well have just arbitrarily pinged me for whatever the penalty would be for losing and let me get on with my life. Uh, but that again in itself feels a little bit arbitrary.
Yeah, and I'm similar, I think, to you. It's like if I'm playing in a PvP match and I lose because the other person outskilled me and something like that, like that's okay. I won't love it, but I can still objectively acknowledge, hey, this person just gamed me. Like he just outplayed me. Like it is what it is. What can I do to improve and do better?
Game has to recognize.
And again, I can sit back and be objective about it and acknowledge that, right? The emotional side of me will still be like, no, this guy just got lucky, so lucky and bad, right? But no, in reality, that's not what happened. But yeah, when you lose because you're just thrown into a completely unwinnable scenario that even the highest level of skill differential, if I'm so much more skilled than them, doesn't matter, they're still going to beat me. Then, like you said, it's like, well, why did I even load into the game? Why are we even playing this one? And that they just get to continue to go on, and I have to play more to get the same amount of reward that they did for winning this despite no skill.
And to be fair, I'm not going to necessarily say that the whales are no skill in that
Yeah,
sense.
they're not.
Uh,
Yeah,
but it is one
not the
where,
implication, right?
yeah, that's not what we're trying to say, but it is one where it is frustrating. It's the situation of, okay, why are you throwing in a, middle school JV team against the Cleveland Browns? Like the Cleveland Browns might not be the greatest team of all time on any given
Maybe
year.
that may be a poor analogy. There's probably better football teams you could have pulled from.
They're still pro football players, though. That's the point. Like, yeah, sure,
Well,
skill might not be there,
I'm
but
glad you said junior highs then, because I mean, you start talking, oh, yeah, college ball versus pros. Like, I'd argue there, especially. I'd
look,
argue
I got
college kids
family
shouldn't
who
even
are
be able to
Cleveland
skate.
Brown fans. Let's not get into this one. That's a fight at Thanksgiving I'm not willing to deal with because they will remember. But anyways, regardless,
But but again, that's kind of what the focus on games that have PvP is the sole and only gameplay mode in it. I know your premise here and your take, you're expanding this to just PvP as a whole. So I want to kind of talk about that frame of reference and why you think PvP in non-PvP exclusive games also sucks. Like, what is your argument for that?
so I want to be clear, I guess, when I'm arguing about this. I am not arguing that the game sucks because PvP is in it. I am talking explicitly about just that. And basically, my issue with it is part of it is that I feel like Brown Dust did the best PvP I've seen, and nobody copied that model to a certain degree. Which is one of the things I loved about the original Brown Dust was they had basically a little league, for lack of a better term, where lower end characters, basic characters, I think I forget what the rankings were in.
And to clarify, you said Brown Dust, the original Brown Dust, which eventually was renamed Brave 9 for
Yes,
those that were getting Brown Dust 2 confused. But go ahead.
yes, Brave 9 that was renamed from Brown Dust. They had a system in it where basically, to use Hoyoverse as an example, they had a PvP mode that was exclusive to 4-star champions, or 4-star characters. So you couldn't take in higher level characters. You were limited to, okay, look, you can only take 4-star or lower, and I believe they had a rotating cycle of like banned characters, where basically they would go like, okay, this season, these 3 or 4 or 5 characters you can't take for whatever reason. Um, and they would rotate in and out depending. But in general, they had a set grouping that you could use. They were all lower end, so everyone could do it. These were characters that were available to everyone. Yes, there was a degree of resource investment that could make a difference, but after a certain point, they all had very clear top ends. Like if you maxed out your 4 stars on your PvP team, you could meaningfully engage in PvP against others. There was a unrestricted bracket basically that let you bring your 5 stars, 6 stars, your high end characters as they kept on adding caps to the different ranks. You could bring those characters in that mode, and you're welcome to do so. But at least there was a skill only mode. Now, admittedly, the meta in that lower end was fairly set, if I remember correctly. Having jumped in and out over the years, I don't remember it changing all that much. But in general, you had your set of characters, you could play through them. There was back and forth, and there was a curatedness to it, meta to it, that made it, for me, fun. And again, it also gave a purpose to lower end characters. I know I caught some heat last week for saying 4 stars were useless, but things like this lower level PvP mode help deal with the fact that sometimes lower end characters tend to get, instead of useless, let's say, become more and more pointless, where there's just not a reason to develop them, there's not a reason to invest in them as a player, and as developers, there's no reason to make more of them because their players have no reason to use them. So having exclusive modes for lower level characters helps alleviate that problem, but at least from a PvP standpoint, it also means that you can create a more equitable, skill-based, team-building-based system instead of, okay, who is the newest character that came out with the biggest number, that if you don't buy it, you might as well not be playing PvP this season until the next busted character comes out. And that's sort of the other problem I have with PvP in a lot of non-PvP gacha games, is you tend to get a somewhat of a split focused on character design, where you'll have some characters where it's okay, it's great in PvE, but not really useful in the PvP, or great in PvP, not useful in PvE. And then, of course, you get the super characters that are just so broken that they dominate. But that sort of split focused, which part of that is just an issue of I don't enjoy gacha PvP. So when a PvP exclusive gacha character comes out, all that means is that I've got a easy skip. But I will admit it is a little bit annoying to see that split focus. I would have preferred a more, I don't want to use the word focus again, but
I know you hit on a lot of points, so I want to touch on a few things before I start to forget what I was going to respond to. But I mean, you mentioned characters being strong in PvP, but maybe not as strong in like PvE aspects or other game modes, or characters that are strong in both. I think developers use that as the opportunity to say that you're able to diversify your roster in terms of using more characters. Using more characters. And I mean, if you take out PvP, I mean, you still have like that same type of concept when it comes to other modes. It's like, okay, well, this character is good for clearing single target stuff, like big bosses. This character may be better for clearing waves after waves of enemies. So this one will clear this type of unit, but do it, is more about like speed, like if you're doing a timed trial type mode. So the idea of, it's just another Nikkei that is for another game mode, that logic, I don't know, it kind of falls flat if you were only using that one, and you're not only using that logic in terms of your.
And to be clear, it's mainly because like I said, I don't enjoy PvP, so that's where my dissatisfaction comes from.
But to hold that against the PvP mode, well, it's like, well, this character, I'm going to skip this character because it's only good in this game mode. It's like, we also have characters that are also only good in content that's a big boss, like an HP sponge. We have characters that are only good against waves of multiple enemies. And so again, it's just following that logic that doesn't necessarily track. But that wasn't your only argument, and so we can kind of jump into that. I actually do agree regarding the original Brown Dust, aka Brave Nine's PvP. That was really well done. It brought value to lower tiered units, and even within that PvP mode, there were restrictions because they had 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star units, and I believe you could use all the 3 stars and then up to 2 4-star units. Um, and then just for more context, every character can be raised to a 6-star unit essentially. Uh, but the original level, you could only use max of the original 4-star characters, but everything could ultimately get up to the 6-star levels if memory serves correct. Um, but that is a good way to help, like I said, kind of give those lower units more value. To go to their sequel with Brown Dust 2, their PvP uh, is good in terms of like the quality of life, in terms of getting the dailies knocked out, how you can literally use all 40 of your energy in like 2 or 3 runs rather than having to do 40 individual fights and then get the same amount of rewards as you would as if you had done the 40 fights. So I appreciate the quality of life in that, and that I think speaks well for like somebody like you who maybe doesn't enjoy PvP, um, as far as like, oh, checking off that daily, getting it done really quick rather than having to go through 40 fights would take 7 8 10 minutes just on its own, much less the rest of your dailies. Now, as far as like other PvP modes, and you're talking about them being skippable, I think a good format for PvP, and Brown Dust 2 kind of does this. Girls Frontline 2 does this. Nikkei does it as well, and a couple other gotchas, but just using those examples to say that the good things with PvP with those is the rewards in it aren't like so exponentially greater for the top performers that you're going to feel like you're missing out on tons of progress because you're not placing highly in the arena rankings for the week. The growth materials you maybe get from some of these games are nominal in terms of the difference that you're seeing, if any at all. For some of those games, there's not really even a difference between losing a combat and winning a combat. And then you could maybe talk about your weekly rewards being 100 or 200 or 300 less, when the context though is you're receiving a multi-thousand payout. 100 200 isn't that huge of a difference. And then something that's cool, that's kind of fun in like the Girls Frontline 2 PvP is the community basically has a gentleman's agreement where you set your defensive roster right because you fight against other players' teams, but they're AI controlled. It's not live PvP. But one of the friendly things the community has done is they set their defense to be one low-leveled unit, rather than a whole squad of four characters that are all leveled up and geared out and everything like that. And so it makes the PvP that you're required to do every day if you want to do that aspect of the daily go a lot quicker. You take one max level character from your team and you can wipe out that one unit pretty quickly, and then you're on to the next thing rather than having to actually strategize, because Girls Frontline 2 is that XCOM type game. So rather than having to strategize and position everything and take multiple turns to beat a team of 4 equally geared units. So I appreciate the gentleman's agreement that community has built, in terms of, we know you want to get through this. I want to get through this too. So I'm just going to set a weak unit, because losing a combat doesn't do anything to hurt your ranking. It doesn't de-rank you or anything like that. And it's very easy to get to the top tier of rewards just by going through and doing your 3 battles against somebody with a 1 low-level unit in there.
Okay. I mean, that does, though, make me question it. If, I guess the long and the short of it would then be, okay, well, if players are actively working to subvert these systems, why have these systems? Like, if using the Girls Frontline example, if the vast majority of the community have this gentleman's agreement where they basically go, okay, fine, we're just trying to get through this. And this is a legitimate open-ended question. And I guess
Okay.
the developers have to come up with this on their own, but is there enough of an interest that they should have spent time developing this? Like, could they have instead focused on something else that might have been better, more fun, less annoying? Um, than
Well,
that,
I don't have the numbers or anything in front of me
yeah.
to see like
No,
how I would
we're
be
we're
playing
playing
it.
in sand.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I would say generally speaking, you're always going to have a portion of the player base that wants PvP, is competitive in that nature, and wants to push and show off the shiny profile frame that you get, or whatever it is
mm,
in the particular game. Girls Frontline 2, I think that is actually what it is. Um, and the Girls Frontline 2's credit, they have a lot of different game modes with a lot of different challenging content. Which I can appreciate. PvP is just one aspect, and they have at PvP with it. And I think they also do actually have real time PvP. I've not actually tried it because it is not an integral part of your daily loop. It is literally the rewards you get out of it. I think are just if as long as you play 30 matches, you'll get a cosmetic gun skin each season, and it's like not really worth my time so much. So, but there are others that love to get in there and show off how strong their units are and make big numbers, against other people. So I I think that's why it's there because a player base is so diverse. You want to have as many things as you can to kind of attract different types of players to the different type of content within your game. And if it doesn't take that much from a development standpoint to implement it and set up that type of system, then why not go for it?
fair enough. Again, I agree with you there. There are going to be people that enjoy it. I guess my question would be, obviously they've done it, so they feel that it's of value. But I would be curious to know, sort of from the back end, whether that's one where they actively see people really engaging in it all that much, or if it's just for the enjoyment of 20 or so whales who are, you know,
Yeah,
bashing each
I
other's face in.
for games like that and like Girls Frontline 2, it's because of the how easy it is to rank up to get to Masters 1 essentially in their PvP ranking system, which is the highest tier. I wonder what the breakdown is in the player base amongst what players or what ranks. Um, and then what level those accounts are, right? So like do you have folks that are max leveled accounts but just haven't played PvP and therefore are down in like bronze 3 or whatever? Or is the dispersion of players a bit, different? Mostly everybody's in the Masters rank because of the Gentleman's Agreement, because it's pretty friendly and favorable in terms of not ranking you down for not playing. Like you basically every week you'll rank down. So if you reach Masters 1, you'll start the next week Masters 2, and then after 4 wins, you're back up to Masters 1, which 4 wins just equals essentially 2 days because you get 3 attempts a day. Um, so it's pretty easy, but I'd wonder what the distribution of players and ranks would be to see how many people are actively doing that, or like you maybe skip it because like I can do my dailies and not have to do that, and I can do all these other game modes that are much more enjoyable to me and much quicker to do than PvP.
But regardless, I guess, circling back a little bit more to my point, um, I do think the root of my issue in a lot of Gacha PvP is the fairness problem of, running into just teams that are more powerful than you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, again, that is going to vary game by game. Um, you know, some games have much better matchmaking than others, where they will put you in against people of roughly equivalent power level. But typically, from what I've seen, it tends to be a little bit more slipshod than that, just because it's not a primary focus for a lot of these devs. I would also throw in the caveat here. Uh, I'm not really including tower climb events as like PvP, where it's see who can climb the highest in this tower by just basically wailing out and having the best PvE team in order to claw up there.
You're talking purely player fighting against player account.
Yeah, I'm talking purely, you know, your account versus another account against their units, not who can beat this boss rush quicker or beat this harder and harder and harder content. Uh, and again, I think part of the reason why that doesn't irk me quite as much is, as I mentioned earlier, it keeps the game mode fairly focused. The designer isn't trying to have to worry about, to kind of roll myself back a little bit. Um, I used to play World of Warcraft, and one of the kind of issues that came up throughout World of Warcraft, at least when I was playing back in Classic era and on, was PvP, where the game wasn't really designed and balanced around PvP as a system. It was just sort of an optional extra that was there. And so the developers didn't really focus on it. It was very jank. Eventually, as time went on, they did put more and more effort and development time into making it work, and it kind of developed into its own sub game within the game, where certain effects would work differently on players than it would on mobs and so on and so forth. But that's the way I feel a lot of Gacha PvP tends to go. If it's a PvP only game, then it's a fine tuned system that unfortunately is rotten at the core because of the pay to win nature of it. And if it's not a PvP only game, a lot of times I've found that it is a secondary sort of focus, and they either do everything they can to minimize its importance, like they did with Girls Frontline 2, or if they do make it important, it's just so janky and weird that it's not worth my time. That's sort of, I guess, my thesis statement. Um, I know I probably haven't convinced anyone um, in that regard, but at least as far as my feelings, my thoughts on PvP and Gacha go, that's sort of my conclusions that I have come to over years of playing.
Okay. Yeah, I think PvP. It's well, not necessarily my favorite thing. Maybe I would have a different opinion if I were the Leviathan. But as a mostly free to play player, I see where you're coming from. I think for me, PvP can be okay and enjoyable and good as long as again the game has other gameplay modes and it's not solely focused on PvP stuff. But also, if in terms of the quality of life stuff, to check your dailies boxes, it's quick to get done. So whether it be like auto simulate the battle, maybe like Nikkei does, or maybe the community's been gentleman agreement like Girls Frontline 2. And then the other thing too is then the rewards from the weekly PvP rewards or even the daily PvP rewards, right, for playing or winning or losing a battle. As long as I'm not missing out because I'm not partaking in these things, then it's not really much of a problem that way. It's like, oh, this is kind of essentially optional content because I can still complete all daily rewards and not have to do this, but I could if I wanted to for maybe an extra 2 to 5% reward type stuff. So it's not terrible in most cases. And actually, now if I'm thinking about most of the games that I play, the PvP rewards based off of rank aren't that disparaging between the highest and the lowest ends. So
It's nice bonus for whales, but for us free to play, it's not worth getting too stressed.
but I think that's going to be kind of the closing thoughts there, I suppose, unless you had any other points you want to touch on, or
Uh,
are you good there?
I think I'm good.
All right,
I've got
got it
to.
off your chest. All right. Well, we do have some other things I know we want to get to today. We have a new character release with Hawkeye Star Rail and Hyacinth. But we also have a good chunk of events to get through. So, Steve, I guess I'll throw it over to you for the event.
All right. So for events this week, all three Hoyoverse games have events going on. I'm going to start with Honkai Star Rail. With the most recent patch, we've gotten a new event, Legend of the Galactic Baseballer, Demon King. You might remember it from, I believe, Pinacone. There's the basically roguelite game mode. It's a combat game mode. Go through, you fight through, you get different upgrades, and so on and so forth. This appears to be a rerun of that one or a refresh of that event. For Genshin Impact, we get Operation Downpour Simulation, another one of the minigames Impact events. This one's based off of a tabletop exercise or board game. And then for ZZZ, we get A Tale Through the Looking Glass, which is a another event that appears to be based around, I want to say Edo, Japan. Basically, a flashback, historic fantasy type event. So those are the three events that we've got running this week. Go out there and get your primos, Star Jade or Mono. can never remember what ZZZ's
Oh,
polychrome.
so close. It's not a single chrome.
Yeah,
It's
polychrome.
multiple chromes.
Yep. So yeah, that polychrome. But yeah, that is it for events in the Hoilers.
Right. Well, speaking of using your Stellar Jades, we did have a new character drop in Honkai Star Rail. We're looking at Hyacinth. So she dropped this past week. Hyacinth is a wind element in the Path of Remembrance. Shocker there, another Remembrance character as we continue to journey here. Looking at Hyacinth, she is, I mean, if I had to do a too long didn't read version, she is the healer for Casterus.
Good
That
summation.
is what she, I'm sorry?
I said good summation.
Yeah, I mean that's what she is. She does fit in a lot of different teams, but if you know you had to have a best friend, Castrus and Hyacinth being paired together is going to make some very strong combination. And uh, even with free to play teams to fill in the other two slots, which we'll break down teams here in a moment, you're very close to zero cycling a lot of the content here going on currently. But to break down first her build, of course we have Signature Light Cone as option, but we also have a secondary option as the one from the Herta's store, the Memories Curtain Never Falls. So those are kind of going to be the two main options for, and with the Herta's store one being free to play option, that's going to be the best option if you're not wanting to pull on her her signature light cone banner. Now, I will say, as far as like looking at the numbers and everything, that with her signature light cone, there is a pretty substantial jump in DPS for your not only her on her own, but also the team DPS output as well. It's a pretty hefty jump. I think I was seeing numbers up to like 30% better with the signature light cone than if you were to be using a different light cone. So it is something to consider, and I think I'd almost, it's usually when we see a character, we talk about which is more important, maybe an Eidolon copy or a signature light cone, which would you lean towards? And I think this is one of the rare ones where a signature light cone might actually be a nod better than looking at one copy for the first Eidolon. Um, if you have that much and you're looking that deep on your account, right? As she stands on her own without her signature light cone, still great. Still a pretty solid pull, whether you have Castress or not. I'd almost argue if you have Castress, she's almost like a must pull just because she synergizes so well. And you can read her kit on this live server now, so I'm not going to be diving into that. But as far as her build, best relic set, we do have a brand new relic set out, Warrior Goddess of Sun and Thunder. This set, for those that are unfamiliar or haven't had a chance to log in yet, the two-piece is going to increase the speed of the user by 6%, and the four-piece set states when the wearer and their memo sprite provide healing to an ally target aside from themselves, the wearer gains Gentle Rain, which can be triggered up to one time per turn, lasting for 2 turns. While the wearer has Gentle Rain, increases their speed by 6%, and all allies crit damage by 15%. Effect cannot be stacked. So yeah, makes her faster so she can cast more, do more things, buffs teammates speed, buffs her speed, buffs allies crit damage. So that's going to be the 4-piece way to go there. If you're in the process of farming for that, also acceptable would be something like the 2-piece set of that, and then 2-piece messenger traversing hacker space, or Cerados's relived ordeal, which the 2-piece set for those increases speed by 6%. So essentially, she's going to be a very fast character that you want to have a high speed on. For planetary sets, you're going to be looking at Giant Tree of Wrapped Brooding. Conveniently, you farm at the same time as if you were farming for Casterus, planar set as well. So that's pretty nice to know. So that's going to be looking there. As far as the best stats, for main stats body, outgoing healing is going to be the priority because the more she's healing, the faster Caster's ultimate generates, and the faster that ultimate generates, more damage she does, and then the more health she sucks up, and then the more healing, and then also as part of the kit, which again, I'm not going to get into the details, but the more healing she does, more damage her fat little unicorn's gonna do. But if you can't get outgoing healing on the body, HP percentage is also acceptable as a main stat. For the boots, you're gonna look at speed. For the planar sphere, we're gonna look at HP percentage, and for the link rope, you're gonna look at energy regen rate. You're gonna want to prioritize speed. You're gonna at least want to actually get a break point of 200 because she does get some extra bonus to, I believe, crit damage once she's over 200 speed. And then once you have over 200 speed, then you can focus more on HP percentage and crit damage. And then lastly, effect res. So that is going to be her build. In terms of her team, like I mentioned, Castris is going to be the best partner for her. The premium team for Castris and Hyacinth is going to also include Tribby and Remembrance Trailblazer. So if you are like me and you didn't pull for Tribby, you can sub in a couple other options for her. Maybe you have Sunday, maybe you have Rune May. Those can all be substitutes as well. My Castris team is, it's Castris, Rune May, Remembrance, Trailblazer, and now Hyacinth, who will be placing Gallagher. But maybe your account looks a little different, than mine, or maybe you don't have some of those characters built, or just don't have them at all. Asterisk, Mighty, Tribby, Hyacinth is, I think, premium team, since all these banners have just happened. So if you did pull on all of those, you have those available to you as well. There is some synergy Hyacinth with Blade, but this is going to be contingent on Blade getting his buffs in the future. Because right now his damage is pretty paltry when compared to other units. So the Blade team, for those that are curious what it looks like, would be Blade, Sunday, Tribby, and Hyacinth. There's also a team out there with Acheron. So it'd be Acheron, her partner Xiao Q, however you want to pronounce that, Pela, and Hyacinth. It is strongly encouraged to have Hyacinth's signature light cone if you're running her with Acheron. And then I did see a funny build theorized. I don't know how this actually works in practice. I'd have to look at the numbers. But I saw a DPS build, so it is still worth pointing out just because I think it was humorous. But DPS Hyacinth build would be Hyacinth, Sunday, Rune May, and Tribby, with Hyacinth the main carry there, which is wild to me since she is at her heart a healer. But that's going to be Hyacinth in a nutshell. Of course, with new characters, we don't have any MOC data yet, but we will be following up on that once through this cycle. So that's going to be Hyacinth in a nutshell. And Steve, I know you and I are both Castris Havers, so we both pulled for her. And we can talk about our experiences. For me, she came home real quick.
Oh, yeah.
For those that are curious about my recent pull saga and Star Rail, when we pulled for Castris on my account with the last pulls I did, I hit Castris and Soft Pity, and then in that same 10 pull, I hit Bronya. And so I was on my guarantee for Hyacinth, and 4 pulls in, and not 10 pulls, literally 4 pulls in, because they were the remaining 4 pulls from the last pull with Castris and Bronya, a 2-for-1 deal. So my first 10 pull on the Hyacinth banner, boom, she came home. So within 20 pulls, I've gotten 3 5-star units. So I've been extremely fortunate, and it freed me up to pull for her light cone while also still having enough to pull for Cypher in the coming patch, because I'll probably be doing that. So I was floating on cloud 9. Steve, how did your pulls go?
They went well. Went to pity, or not to full pity, but soft pity. But won the 50-50. So she came home, and that left me with enough reserves that I was able to go for her light cone, and again, won the 75-25. So she is set, and I'm on cruise control for the next patch or two.
Now, you were able to pre-farm for Hyacinth.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little naive to her until a couple days before the patch. So I am still trying to max out materials, and I still, of course, have the lovely artifact grind to go through. But how's been your experience using her in MOC this round, or any other content that you've been running her in?
She's been great. She slots in amazingly into my Castris team. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't tried out any of the other potential builds or usages of her at this time, so it's primarily been her and Castris, just kind of going out there and stomping everything. As far as MOC goes, weird side tangent, but I tend to find that MOC 12 is actually easier most of the time than MOC 10 and 11. Because 10 and 11 tend to be more generic and have like weird off setups that I'm not currently built for at a given time. Whereas 12, it's usually a little bit easier for me to go like, okay, fine, here's my through line, and just kind of build that way and be good. So yeah, I was able to clear MOC 12 with it. I was also able to wrap up the Apocalypse's Shadow 12, max that out with them as well. So she's great for high end content. Um, I've been enjoying her. I will say that I did run into some issues with a combination of speed tuning and SP usage on my teams. I run Castress Sunday, uh, Remembrance Trailblazer, and Hyacinth. And what I was finding was I would have Sunday come up in the queue, pull forward Castress, then Remembrance Trailblazers Tribby would not Tribby, Mim, the Remembrance creature that they have, would pop her ult because I don't have control over that. It just decides to ult on me, and then that would randomly. I would then have to decide, okay, do I re-pull up uh, Castress or do I pull up Hyacinth? And just a lot of speed tuning issues that way, because Castress is very slow, and when she's not an ult, and Hyacinth is very, very fast. Like you build her very quick, and I believe I have her sitting at like 180 pre-combat buffs. So it can get a little bit dicey there, especially because Hyacinth wants to be skilling every time that she is up in rotation. So she will burn through SP very quickly if you don't gauge the rest of your team correctly. But yeah, that's I guess my experience with her just a couple days in.
Excellent. Well, you did mention that funny point about MOC and finding floor 12 a little easier. It's funny you mentioned that because my MOC run with a half-built Hyacinth with not the right artifact set even, um, I was able to three-star floor 12, but ironically on floor 10, I actually two-star, 2 out of 3 that one because I had a unit fall literally the turn after I won the very next action, and it was just the boss ticked one of my units down. So it's funny that you mentioned that because that has exactly been my experience to a T this go round. But I really look forward to getting her fully built, and then I'll probably go back and run that one floor again for that last star just to get it done. But that's going to do it there for Chat of Hyacinth. We do have some other Gacha news I want to get to this week. So a couple of things. We have some collabs going on. So Aether Gazer is doing a collaboration with God Eater, and that is going to be starting on June 5th. So if you are playing Aether Gazer or if you are a fan of God Eater and that IP, you might want to jump in and check it out over starting again June 5th. We do have another collab in maybe a less popular game or a less well-known game, Haze Reverb, is collabing with Chained Soldier, which I'll be honest, not familiar with Chained Soldier's IP. Haze Reverb was very similar in terms of gameplay to the original Brown Dust, in terms of the strategy and auto turns with kind of a grid-based map. But it was mech girls, I think, instead of sword and magic and that type of aesthetic. I believe we tried it at launch, but I know I didn't stick with it. But anyway, Haze Reverb, Chain Soldier collab starting here. Actually, I think it might be going on now. I didn't actually I didn't see the date on that. But anyway, other news, Snowbreak 2.8, they just dropped the trailer, Fragments of Truth, so be on the lookout for that new patch to be coming out here in the near future. Other news, Etheria Restart, while not out currently, it is right around the corner. Etheria Restart is going to be a turn-based RPG, similar playstyle to Star Rail, unless I'm getting it confused with another game that's coming out soon. But Etheria Restart, the news here is the developers announced they will, when the game launches, be dropping the pity. So during the play tests and the beta trials, pity was at 100 pulls. They are dropping it to 80 pulls for the launch. So just something to be made aware of if you were interested in trying it out, or you saw 100 pulls and thought, wait, that's too many. Of course, ultimately, it'll come down to what's the pull economy going to look like, but still worth noting, dropping pity from 100 down to 80. Last thing I wanted to talk about today, I want to actually dive a little bit deeper into and why I'm saving it for last, is Nikkei Goddess of Victory officially launched in China. And there's been a bit of drama surrounding the launch in the Chinese server as it pertains to features and quality of life changes and improvements that the Chinese servers are getting on day one, and us on the global servers who just celebrated our 2.5 year anniversary do not have these quality lives, and it's made a pretty vocal portion of the fan base pretty upset, taking to the Google Play Store and the Apple Store to leave 1-star reviews and thread upon thread on the Nikkei Reddit complaining about this. But just to kind of touch on some of the things that they have given the Chinese server that global does not have yet. So some of the confirmed changes that we have here from some sources where the loading times have been significantly reduced, so they've optimized some things. The Tribe Tower game mode. So this is, you play a floor, you beat it, you go to the next floor and keep climbing. And then they have ones for specific, three manufacturers or four manufacturers in the game now. In the global server, if you beat a floor, you then click next to progress. You have to manually be there to progress. Well, Chinese servers apparently have auto progress, so meaning beat a floor, it will automatically go to the next one until you lose. So you can get up and walk away from the game and do something else, or minimize it if you're playing it on a second monitor, right, and do something else. The big one here for me that I know as I'm disappointed they haven't done anything to improve this system in global yet, would be the manufacturer molds. So for those that play the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But for those that don't, manufacturer molds are, you would get pieces of molds, and once you got 50 pieces, you would have a 61% chance to pull an SSR character, or you would have the remaining 39% to get an SR character and ultimately lose the coin flip. Now these are few and far between. You don't get very many of them, and you have to do a lot of grinding to obtain them. So when you lose, it is especially crushing, because this should be a way to be able to get some characters that are harder to pull, especially the manufacturer specific for like pilgrim units. Well, in the Chinese server, there's no SRs. There are no SRs in these. You can't quote lose these like you could in the global server. You're losing in the Chinese server is when you open a mold, you still have the 61% chance to get an SSR character, but the 39% chance is replaced by 12 shards. And when you get 50 of these, so roughly 5 losses of a 60-40, you then get a guaranteed SSR. So that's still not as good as I think this system could be, but it's definitely better than what global has, because it is ultimately guaranteeing you an SSR unit if you fail 5 times on a 60-40. So it's not even a coin flip. It's a 60-40 in your favor. And if you just are unlucky and lose 5 times, you then get a guaranteed SSR. Whereas right now, it's just a 60-40 pull essentially every time. And so you're not guaranteed anything, which is, again, disheartening when you have to grind as much as you have to for these molds. Other stuff here I'll go through quickly, because these are more quick hitters for the rest of these. The battle pass now has 2 levels. You can choose which to unlock. You can buy the battle pass to get pulls, or you can buy a battle pass that gives leveling currency. You have multiple characters have had slight tweaks or buffs to their kits. You can also now level up 5 characters at once until you are over the 160 wall. So this is more geared toward new players. Shops apparently have been updated. They have better resources, and the characters are available in other shops. So currently, you can only purchase characters or molds of characters in like 1 or 2 specific shops with 1 or 2 specific currencies, and that apparently has a bit more flexibility now. The synchro machine, so the Nikkei formula for leveling, right, is you ultimately level 5 characters. You get them to that 160 wall that we alluded to earlier. And then once they're at that wall, you can then open up the synchro device to put level 1 units in, and it synchronizes them to the highest level of your top 4 or 5 characters. Well, if you removed a character from the synchro device, there used to be a 4-hour cooldown, which you could eliminate by playing for diamonds. Well, China doesn't have to worry about that. They don't have a 4-hour cooldown at all. They can just substitute in as they see fit, which, it's a minor thing, but still annoying, especially if you're trying to play test a couple characters and see how some characters maybe synergize with others. So that's something I'd like to see come to the global server. Update 3, again, this is more geared towards new players that haven't broken the 160 wall yet. But if you reset a character level, it no longer costs gems. It used to cost gems for new players in global, but China, not so much. And those are the big ones, and it's caused quite a stir. And I think some of these points are a bit more frustrating that hasn't been addressed on the global side than others. Some of the cosmetic stuff, whatever have you, I don't care so much about. But that the molds one is a big one. Auto progress and the towers would be a nice quality life. And to me, I don't understand how you can introduce that day one and not give it to the rest of your regional servers, because you're showing you've got the development. They are able to be implemented into the game. So why not just provide it to everybody? So we'll be following that here with Nikkei and see how this gets resolved, how the developers respond, because as of this recording, they have not made any announcements or responded publicly to it from anything that I've seen. But we will continue to follow it. And then Nikkei's got a busy summer coming up because their collaboration with their own Stellar Blade, right, which was a PlayStation launch last year that was a pretty sizable hit. They are doing a collaboration with Stellar Blade in Nikkei over the summer. So, I hope they respond, and I hope the summer events go well here with that collaboration. But that's gonna do it for us this week. We do want to thank you guys for joining us. Let us know your thoughts on PvP and gachas. Do you enjoy that game mode? Do you enjoy PvP only gachas, or do you avoid them like the plague, or do you just not maybe do the PvP daily aspects in your particular gacha? If you did enjoy the episode, though, and you'd like to show your support, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. You can email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com if you have questions or suggestions for the show. We also have a link to our Discord in the description, so you can join us over there for news, game nights, and content notifications. Join us next week where we discuss Honkai Star Rail's 3.3 version quest. But until then, keep gaming.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate.